What is going on, everyone? This is Miles with Windows Central Gaming, and this is the 32nd episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Today, I'm pumped to be joined by Jeff Grubb of GamesBeat and Giant Bomb's smash hit Grubbsnax. How you doing on this fine Saturday, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm just happy to be talking with you, Miles. I love this. Let's have a nice conversation about video games on a Saturday.
I love it. Yeah, you and I were both up late doing shenanigans, so we're a little sleepy, but we're gonna perk up because of all the amazing people hanging out with us in the chat here. Right. You've been on the show multiple times now, so I'm not gonna do the standard intro, but for the people in here who might not know who you are, let them know where they can find you and what's new with you.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm on GamesBeat. Do GamesBeat Decides on Fridays live on YouTube with my buddy Mike Minotti. We do that. It's in the afternoons. You can follow us there on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jeffrey Grubb. And then, yeah, the new stuff's been on Giant Bomb, Grubbsnax. That is live on Thursdays, where we try to dive into the news in a way where people can come in and interact and ask about it, but try to really figure out what's going on. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a good time, but you know, the best way to hang out with me is, you know, either get me on Twitter at Jeff Grubb or come in my Discord, discord.gg/GameS, and just kind of have a conversation with me. I'm always usually available to talk about games. I like doing that. It's one of my favorite things to do. So yeah, I really enjoy that. So if anyone ever wants to reach out, hang out, please let me know. I love that stuff.
And I got to give you and Mike a huge shout out for officially becoming meatfluencers. You did it. Yes. The Beef and Cheddar Boys got the Arby's swag, the Arby's bucket hat, the meat sweats.
If you in the letter they made it clear you can't buy these meat sweats, you have to earn them. So it was very funny that's one of the things in my life that I've earned is a pair of extra large meat sweats. So very proud of that.
Oh, dude, I was so stoked when I was watching the episode yesterday and then seeing you two come on with these ridiculous bucket hats and tracksuits, essentially, that are just giant prints of... It's just a variety of meat, right? It's not just beef. It's just like a pile of meat.
Yeah, they have like the peppercorn bacon and stuff. They got everything on there. It is just... Apparently, they have the meats, and now I have them on my body when I wear this tracksuit. Yeah.
You made it, Jeff. You made it.
Thank you. I'm excited. Yes, I'm very excited about that.
So a huge shout out to the 150 people tuning in already. If you guys are digging the show, we do this live every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. Like it out, share it, all that good stuff. We have a pretty stacked show today. We're going to be talking about PlayStation versus Xbox marketing. We're going to be talking about some prophecies that have been willed into existence. We're going to be talking about Xbox rumors on the acquisition side. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Xbox Game Studios roadmap for 2022 and beyond. So, first topic I want to get into is kind of the interesting marketing dynamic we saw this week from Xbox and PlayStation. Xbox started the week, and this is something I did not expect to wake up to at all, but with a ridiculous meme music video with this classic 90s R&B group basically reimagining one of their hit songs as a Xbox All Access ad. It's all there, which was hilarious, weird, and the commitment to the bit I really have to commend because they really went all in with this. And then on the opposite side, we had PlayStation, who released an ad that was only up for a very brief period of time, which featured the PlayStation 5 upside down, which obviously got memed into oblivion. Hosting, I believe, is a trend now on Twitter.
Oh yeah, that's trending.
Thanks to Jeff. I saw you encouraging it, so a lot of great pictures of upside down PS5s. So Jeff, did you appreciate the All for One music video? And what were your thoughts on the PlayStation ad blunder?
Yeah, I guess I did appreciate that music video. I thought it was very good. I thought it was well done. It's funny. It's the kind of thing where Xbox is good at this stuff right now. It's the kind of thing that does catch on social media and gets a lot of people talking and sharing their stuff. It's not it's not gonna like some award-winning move from them or anything like that. It's not something I'll be thinking about for the rest of my life or
No.
anything. But it's a funny little thing to wake up to, like you said, and I thought it was clever. I think when it comes to the upside down PlayStation 5, I find it very funny because it's just, you look at that thing, you look at the PS5, and you know there's going to be just millions of people literally that are going to just take it out of the box, not like think about that stand, and then just set it down and try to figure out like which way to set it down, and just try to set it down on its long flat side with the disc tray on the top. And it's it's especially funny because the Holstein thing is based on the name Herman Holst, who's the head of PlayStation, who in December of last year, like right after the PlayStation 5 came out, posted a picture of his like setup, and his PlayStation 5 was upside down. And it's like it can happen to anyone, it feels like. And I don't think it's that it's not that like big of a deal. It's not the end of the world.
No.
I'm not like I don't even think Sony should be that worried about it. But it is just every time I look at that thing, it is so oblong and so weird looking that of course people are just gonna be lazy and just throw it out there. And it happens even on a set of people like professionals trying to set it up for a photo shoot. They're just like, what is this stand? Like, how do we even attach it? No, we don't have time for that. Just like, you can't even see it if we put it in there like this. So just set it down like this. It's odd. It does feel, a bit boneheaded, but it's the kind of thing that's not going to be, people aren't going to really, it's not going to stop anyone from buying a PlayStation 5. That's for sure.
Yes, people were pretty harsh on PlayStation when this ad came out because, like you mentioned, this was not the first time that a prominent figure or message or image from PlayStation featured their own console upside down, which, like you said, when I took my PS5 out of the box, I was like, this thing is ridiculous. Like, I tried to lay it on its side, and there's no world where I would ever put that thing on its side because it just looks, even with the stand, it looks so dumb. Like, again, this isn't like some fanboy nonsense. Like, the fundamental design of the PlayStation looks cool. It looks futuristic, but placing it horizontal it doesn't work. Unless you have a ridiculous amount of real estate, unless you have to do it, I would never put my PlayStation 5 horizontal because it looks unnatural. I don't like the curves.
Yep.
It's not flush. It's unnatural.
Yeah, it has to sort of float there. That's why you need the stand. And it even like it looks like it was made to stand vertical. I mean, the Xbox is the same way. They both were made to stand vertical. That's what they want you to do. That's what I mean. But PlayStation made it so determined. It was so determined to make it stand vertical that they just did not design it in any way that made sense to lay down on its side. So that's why the stand's included. And it's just you end up in this situation where you got to keep in mind how inherently lazy most people are, and they aren't going to read the instructions, and they aren't going to. They're just going to throw that plastic disc to the side, and when they set it up, it's just going to sit there, and it's just going to be wobbling over with the disc tray on the top. I don't know. It's funny to me. I don't know. I really enjoy it. And it's like, since it's not that big a deal, the PlayStation 5 still seems to work for most people, even when they do this, that it just kind of feels like, that's silly. This silly thing is, it's going to be weird in a lot of people's homes, and I think that's funny.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things where people were trying to basically put PlayStation at fault here. I think the reality is this was probably a separate production team that did this, set this up, did the shot. They realized that they had shot it upside down, and they were just probably putting it out to see if anyone would notice. Because like it's already shot, it's already edited, we already paid. Like, we're gonna put it out, and then like, oh, okay, people noticed. Let's pull it. Let's take it down, because that was the focus. Like, it was not up. It wasn't up for more than a couple hours. Like, that thing got took down really fast. So people were memeing the hell out of it, and it's like you said, it's just funny. It's just a silly little thing that happened this week. And it doesn't mean the PlayStation 5 is bad or the PlayStation doesn't know what they're doing. It's just a fun blunder that we got to enjoy. So
yeah. Yeah, and it's they take it down because of like legal reasons. If people start like putting their PlayStation 5s like that and they start breaking, Sony doesn't want to be held responsible, so they have to take it down and they can't leave it up and they can't even like really have fun with it, which is a bummer. I think that's one of the reasons like Herman Holtz took down his picture. I mean, obviously it's embarrassing, but he probably just like they're like, hey, we can't have people laying their PlayStation 5s down like this, so you need to take it down. But again, a fun blunder more than anything else.
Yeah. So to your point, with Xbox and the way that they've been kind of approaching it, their marketing team has been doing an incredible job just having fun with the Xbox brand, and it's been really cool to see a company lean into just the fun, goofy side of gaming. And they've also been incredibly receptive to community feedback. So some other kind of big news. There was Daniel Ahmed was talking about how PlayStation and Nintendo and Xbox all were going to have some big news this week. And we got the Switch OLED, we got the State of Play, and we got Dark Souls 3 FPS Boost. Let's go! Which some people were like, oh, so when is that big news coming? And I was like, what do you mean, when is the big news coming? The big news came. Dark Souls 3 got FPS Boost, which is something that I want to talk about because there was an ongoing joke that I had last year where I was basically adding From Software and Bandai Namco with like Stan-esque letters, writing letters to them on Twitter saying, hey, dear Bandai, it's been 6 weeks since my last message, and I just wanted to see when we're getting an enhancement for Dark Souls 3 on Xbox. Because for a while, Dark Souls 3 was 900p, 30 FPS locked, even on the Series X. So if you had a Series X, you're playing Dark Souls 3, which in my opinion is the best From Software game ever made. It runs the worst by far. So like playing this game on Xbox for me, I couldn't do it. I had to buy it on PC. And so I had the PC version because I wanted the frames. And so I was trying to will this into existence. I did the summoning circle. I did everything in my power to will Dark Souls 3 into existence. And then we see Xbox Italy with the little oopsie on their Instagram story.
Yep.
So they came out early with the post, and it was just one game, Dark Souls 3 FPS Boost. That was it. And I was like, what? So I obviously screen grabbed that, shared that out, and then later that evening, I think it was like 7 p.m., late at night, they were just like, not even a whole batch of FPS Boost games, a single game, Dark Souls 3. And I got some winks and some nods from some folks at Xbox. So I'm not going to say that this was my doing per se, but I'm also kind of going to take credit for it. So you're welcome.
I think you should take credit for that. Yeah. It's the kind of thing that Microsoft can still do and drop at any time, and it's still kind of a big deal that these older games that people still really love can get this kind of performance boost at any time with like just a few agreements and a flip of a switch. So I think this is probably pretty close to what the big news was like. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like Daniel Ma was hearing something like Microsoft and From agreed to get a game to run better, and that's the kind of thing that I would think is kind of big news. But I am very happy for you, Miles. Have you gone back and tried it? How's it looking?
Yes, it's still 900p, so the resolution snobs will probably point to that, and I saw some people on Twitter complaining about that. But oh, it feels so good. Like playing this, like because there are areas in Dark Souls 3 on base Xbox One that chug, just infamously run like complete garbage. Like we're talking Breath of the Wild on Switch when you go into the forest to get the Master Sword, like 15 FPS, like really bad. And so to re-experience this game at a locked 60, I don't care that it's 900p. Again, I could play it on PC with higher settings, higher resolution, higher textures. But as a filthy console heathen, it felt special opening this up on Xbox and playing it at 60 FPS. And when Jason Ronald announced this, he mentioned that they basically had to create a new method for FPS boost for Dark Souls 3, which I found was very fascinating. So I'm curious to see what the difference, because that's been the speculation with the reason games like Dark Souls 3 haven't been on there, is that the engines won't work for it. And I also was kind of worried that Bandai Namco was trying to resell us a Ultimate Edition of Dark Souls 3 as well, realistically.
Yeah, definitely.
So those were the two reasons where like it's probably not happening, because they're going to resell this. They're going to sell us the 4K 60 FPS version of Dark Souls 3 this fall. But it was cool to see that happen. And then I'm talking to Jason Ronald right now and Xbox PR to basically coordinate an interview to get some more details on what that looks like and
Yeah, you should do that.
what they had to do to make it happen. Because yes, it's FPS Boost to me. I still don't fully wrap my mind around how it works. It tricks the machine into running the game at 30, but outputting everything at 60. So it's a really cool, interesting system.
Yeah, like games that were like locked to 30, like they think that they're still running at 30, but it just the all the other logic like is actually running at 60, and so the game doesn't like freak out or something like that. So yeah, I agree. I don't understand it either. I would love to hear like what the different method was, like why it was required and what it took to actually get that running, and if that's a good sign for getting it working on like Xbox and Xbox 360 games, which would have very different engines, behind those games as well. So that's exciting.
Yeah, because they're still investigating original Xbox and Xbox 360. Like so far, we haven't seen any of those games with FPS Boost, but there are so many. Like like a lot of first party, the Fables, the Gears of War games. Those are still like 30. So a lot of great first party Xbox games don't have that option to run at 60, and it would be amazing if they can figure that out. So again, really big brain stuff, too big for my brain, but I would love to kind of have some basic primitive grasp on how it all works.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I would listen to that for sure. So make that happen. Let's get Jason Ronald on here and tell us, hey, what is this magic for real? Like actually explain it to me so I understand and come out of this conversation in a way where I can explain it to someone else. That'd be great.
Yes, that is the dream. That is the goal. So working on that. Some other things while we're talking about things being willed into existence. I'm going to retouch on the Bloober and Silent Hill project because there's kind of been some updates with that. So people pulled information of a leak of some code names for some Bloober team projects. There was projects like Black, and they had 3 different projects with descriptions of what they might be. And Bloober team actually commented on these and basically said that some of these have been repurposed and some of these have been essentially canceled, because there was some Silent Hill concept art that was circulating on the internet this week that people were associating to Bloober Team's Silent Hill project. And Bloober Team came out and said, no, that stuff is not us. We are working on 2 projects that are bigger than the medium. And they did not deny a possibility where they are working on a Silent Hill title.
Right.
So I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this, but what's your current stance on Bloober Team and Silent Hill?
I mean, I think that still has to be what they're really working on. I still think that's the project that we're going to hear about between them and Konami. I mean, it fits. It fits with the reporting. It makes a lot of sense. Is this like the next numbered Silent Hill? Is this Silent Hills? I don't know about any of that. I feel like they might try to have Bloober do something different, especially if they have like the reporting says, another Silent Hill project in the works with a Japanese studio. But I definitely think they want to do more with their licenses, with more with their properties, and this is something that could work for them. And I mean, I know that there's a lot of skepticism about Bloober and Silent Hill specifically, but I don't think there's nothing there that I think Konami would scare Konami off enough to be like, no, try something new. Don't use Silent Hill. That's too precious to us. I don't think anything's too precious to Konami. That's one thing.
No,
and also I think Bloober can actually probably deliver on this if given enough time and money and creative license. So yeah, I think that's exactly what we're going to see.
Yeah, I agree. There's again coincidences don't correlate to evidence typically. In the case of Bloober and Silent Hill, it's something I've been talking about for a while, 8 months or so, because there's been all these stacking coincidences back to back to back to back. And they've been teasing that they're working with a famous publisher on a game. And so there's been all this stuff that kind of hinted to a world where Bloober made a Silent Hill. And then the announcement of that official partnership, I'm like, okay, at this point, it's not confirmed. Obviously, they haven't shown us what this is going to be, and they haven't said Bloober's doing it, but it would be more unlikely that Bloober is not working on a Silent Hill at this point.
Oh, yes. Yes, I agree. It's I just don't know what other reason they would bring them in other than to work on a Silent Hill. So yeah.
Their entire DNA is horror games. They are the biggest
Yes.
Silent Hill nerds of all time. Like talking to those.
They're not making Mega Man X or whatever. They're not making the next Mega Man Legends game. Yeah, right.
So, yes, at this point, I think it's very likely. And what's interesting and what I want to see from this project is what it is, because we know Konami is taking pitches for a lot of their biggest IP because they understand the value of having good games, even though for a stretch of time they didn't really care because they were just coasting. They were making more money than they ever had made doing nothing, just licensing out their franchises to casinos and merchandise and just rolling in money. And they didn't have to do a damn thing. But now I think they're starting to realize that you have to keep those brands in the mind share of the public and introduce new people to them, or the value of those brands will diminish. So whether they actually want to or not, they have to start making some good games from these IP. So we heard about, what was it, Supermassive? Is that the team that did Until Dawn, or my
no, Supermassive sounds right.
That's okay. Yeah, the team did Until Dawn. We know they pitched an episodic Silent Hill, and it sounds like they weren't really on board with that. So I'm curious how Bloober team won this pitch. Again, we don't know that this is the reality, but we know a lot of people pitched for Silent Hill. There was probably a huge line of developers who wanted to make a Silent Hill. And so Bloober team, whatever they pitched, I want to believe is something cool if Konami's like, okay, you above these other teams, we're going to give you the rights to one of our most iconic, beloved franchises and give you a shot.
Yeah, I think we'll see all that relatively soon. I imagine that the reason they start talking about this stuff is because they have plans to show us what it's going to look like here pretty soon. But yeah, I think you're right. They must have had a specific pitch. I think part of it's probably that Bloober says, "Hey, we can do it for relatively cheap," and compared to some other studios. But I'm sure the idea is probably pretty solid, at least on paper. It's just a matter of executing now. But I mean, you're right about Konami and the way it wants to treat its properties right at this moment. It feels like it is in a position where it wants to stop. It wants to get a lot of these things out of the dormant category. It wants to make sure that some of these things are more active than what they were, and whether or not that is to capitalize on them in other arenas, like either in terms of movies and branding and merchandising, or casino games or whatever. Whatever the motivation is there, it seems like they are being shooken up a little bit to start moving with these things in a way where they hadn't been in the last couple of years. I still don't think that probably still doesn't turn into a lot of internal studios making a lot of games. I know they mentioned that. I think that they're just going to take a bit more oversight, I think, internally while working with external partners. But who knows if that turns into something where there's always that rumor of Konami licensing out their entire IP things to everyone, or working with other companies. There's a lot of rumors one way or the other about that, and we still don't know what their plan is with all that stuff. It just seems like they are more encouraged now to work with partners and make that stuff work. So there's probably something there.
Yes, I'll be honest and open with you, Jeff. There was a period of time where I didn't even want a new Silent Hill announced because I didn't have any faith that it would be a game that anyone wanted to play. Like after playing Downpour, I was like, okay, Konami doesn't care. They're not going to give anyone a budget. They're not going to give anyone any sort of realistic resources to make a good Silent Hill game. So maybe it just needs a break. And so there was a stretch of time where I was like, please don't even announce it. We had Contra Road Core. We had Metal Gear Survive. Imagine if Silent Hill was announced that year. Imagine what that would be. So I do have a little more faith that Konami has at least understands what they need to do with their IP to make them important financially, because let's be real, Konami has proven that money is way more important than anything else for them in recent history. You have Capcom, who's publicly talked about how they are concerned about how their games are received critically. Obviously, they want to make money as well, but you have Konami, who clearly didn't give a damn how their games are received. They just wanted to see if they could milk some of these franchises, make some easy money on low-budget games. So, I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic about the future of Konami IP. Especially again, I know people have their criticisms of Bloober Team, and that's fine. They've been an indie developer. They've been an indie horror team for a while. They haven't really had any huge budget games. People point to the Medium, and that's their biggest game in terms of budget, and that was still an independently developed and independently published game. So again, I want to see these guys get a chance to do something special, because I've been talking about how I think they would be the team. If we're looking at realistic modern developers for a Silent Hill game, in my eyes, I don't think there is anyone better than Bloober Team.
Right.
Again, everyone wants Kojima. Everyone wants the Silent Hills dream to come back. I don't think it's happening. I don't think there's ever a world where that ever happens, as much as that might crush people's dreams, but...
It is a dream. Like, yeah, it's the kind of thing where they said it and it went away, but it still lives on in people's heads about this is the next Silent Hill game. I imagine this is what they said Silent Hills. I've been craving it ever since, and it's just never gonna work out. I guess never say never, especially with Kojima.
Never say never, but
it is not like in the realm of possibility in the near future. That's not what the next Silent Hill game is going to be. It's not what the next Kojima thing's going to be. So, yeah, people are going to have to give up on that for now.
Yes. But yeah, let's move on past that for now. Maybe we reconvene. Maybe Kojima and Del Toro come back 10 years later, surprise everyone with Silent Hills. I'd be fine for that. But Konami needs to prove itself with a lot of IP. So with this Bloober Team and Silent Hill talk, I was also jokingly talking about the rumors of Xbox and Konami earlier this year, because there was a rumor that started, and it was sourced as Windows Central as the origin of the Xbox and Konami rumor. Somebody took to Reddit and they said that they had heard from Windows Central that Xbox is buying Konami. And since then, it's kind of been permeating and sitting in the back. And I've had people message me, DM me, and say, "Hey, what is going on with Xbox and Konami?" And so to feed into this rumor and to just have some fun, I talked about the possibility of what if Ninja Theory got the license for Castlevania? So after they wrap up Hellblade 2, we see a Ninja Theory developed Castlevania. That possibility to me is incredibly exciting. But that being said, I don't know the origins of this Xbox Konami rumor. I've been digging. I've been trying to figure out where it's coming from, if there's any validity to it, because I had some people message me and I had some folks on Twitter saying that they would delete their Twitter account if this didn't happen. Like somebody told them, they have information from somebody who works at Konami that Xbox and Konami are partnering, and if it doesn't get announced, they will delete their Twitter account. And that doesn't mean anything realistically, but I found that conviction slightly interesting.
Yeah, there's rumblings about a big investment coming from the West into a Japanese company. That's something I've heard recently, and I've heard it like that. It's put that way, so it's like that vague. But that alone is pretty interesting, because that's typically not how things go. Typically, there's not a Western company investing in a Japanese company, because there's a lot of red tape, and it was very difficult. It's become a little bit more streamlined and a little bit easier to accomplish in the last year or so. I think the rules on that have lightened up. So maybe we start to see that dam break a little bit, and maybe that has something to do with Microsoft and Konami. I think there's a chance still that this like the rumblings I'm hearing might be Microsoft and Kojima Productions, but I mean, I don't know for sure. So it's like maybe this is all matching up because we're hearing about this because there is something happening with Microsoft and Konami. I think that for Konami it would make some sense, because there's a partner out there with a lot of money that would be willing to help you work on a lot of these games, and for Microsoft it would make a lot of sense. I guess they'd have to match up a lot of studios with a lot of IP, but I guess we'd have to see how this is even going to work. Like, what IPs would be on the table? Is it the entire Konami catalog? Probably not. It's probably something that Konami's like, hey, yeah, everything except for Metal Gear. If you want Metal Gear, that's extra. You could see something like that happening. But this is speculation. We don't know. We have to see what's going to happen. And this is the kind of thing that's been sort of forced into reality because people like we get online and we talk about this stuff, and then it sort of snowballs. Maybe nothing ends up happening at all, and Konami just keeps making pachinko machines and slot machines, and we don't ever really get another Metal Gear Solid from them. That's also in the realm of possibility. But we know that these companies, these big companies like Microsoft, are hungry for content, and Microsoft specifically, and Konami has sort of a treasure trove that it's not doing enough with, and I think that it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because let's say hypothetically, again, this is 100% speculation here, but let's say hypothetically, you're Phil Spencer, you're Matt Booty, you're the head of Xbox Game Studios, and you're looking at IP that carry a lot of weight. Again, Xbox and Phil Spencer have publicly been very adamant about their commitment to growing in Japan and growing in a Japanese market. Konami has a lot of great IP that would do well in Japan. So if you're Xbox and you're coming to the table and you want to work with Konami, you can point to Xbox Game Studios and you can say, these are the teams that we have. Here is the track record of great games that they have made. And here's how we can take some of these IP. And if you partner with us, we can make successful, big reimaginings of some of your most beloved IP. And I imagine it isn't all of them, but I imagine it's Castlevania, I imagine it's Metal Gear, and I'm certain it's Silent Hill. I'm certain we'll get a Silent Hill revealed at some point in the near future. Talking to some people, it sounds like E3 potentially in a perfect scenario was going to have a Konami presence with some big reveals, but that has been pushed. And so I'm curious to see when, if a Silent Hill is getting announced this year, for example, when do you think that would be unveiled? Tokyo Game Show?
Yeah, I think something like that makes sense. You wonder what excuse me, what that E3 presentation would have looked like for Konami, and like what exactly they were going to talk about. Was it just like one game, and that's why they delayed it because it was one game and it wasn't ready. So but yeah, I think the Tokyo Game Show makes some sense, but they could really talk about it at any time, right? Like that's what we know right now is that you can get headlines at any moment, at any time with a tweet, with a blog, with a video presentation, just a quick live stream on YouTube and Twitch, so they could drop it at any moment whenever they're ready. But I think Tokyo Game Show makes maybe a lot of sense, especially if it is about appealing to Japanese audiences. And there's a lot of reasons right now why Microsoft is interested in that beyond like the historical, performance of Xbox in Japan. Japan coming out of the pandemic, Japan's still very much in the pandemic, is playing more games than ever. And everyone who makes games and has access to that data sees that. They see how much Japan is into gaming, right? Like more now than ever in its history. And it's pretty wild to think that that's the case, but that is. And a lot of that stuff's still happening on smartphones. And Microsoft thinks, hey, we have a way to get our games on smartphones in front of that audience with Game Pass and with xCloud. So now's the time to strike if we're going to make a move there. And we don't expect them necessarily to buy Xboxes, but we maybe could get them to play Xbox games on their phone. And maybe that means a lot of Xbox games need to be more appealing to that audience. So lots of motivations to make stuff like that happen. So we'll have to see how that actually plays out.
Yeah, it's been cool to see Xbox have some momentum in Japan where they've historically struggled, because you look at the Xbox launch and they did a lot, honestly, in retrospect, to cater and appeal to a Japanese audience. They had a lot of cool Japanese partnerships with legacy publishers. And so there was a lot of momentum on the Xbox and Xbox 360 early on to try to get into Japan in a big way. And when that didn't succeed, we saw them back off that heavily for a long stretch. And there was basically no collaboration on a legitimate level with a lot of major Japanese publishers. And they lost a lot of market. I guess they didn't lose market share. They just basically, they lost a lot of mind share in Japan. And so people just didn't associate the Xbox at all with Japanese developers or Japan. And so it's been cool that there's been this kind of resurgence, and we've seen Xbox, focus on core Japanese franchises, Dragon Quest, Yakuza, they have an audience in the West and they're very popular in the West, but Dragon Quest especially. Dragon Quest is like the RPG in Japan. People don't understand in the US how big of a deal Dragon Quest is. And so we've seen that with advertising in Japan for Game Pass. They're putting Dragon Quest on the banner for Game Pass, saying, hey, you can play Dragon Quest in Game Pass. And that is moving the needle for them, as we've seen with console sales and momentum. So I want to see him continue. I want to see him make some strides, and I'll be very curious to see, like you said, who are they investing in? What Japanese company are they investing in? And what is that going to look like? So is it Kojima? Is it Konami? I want to know. I really want to know.
Yeah, I mean, there will definitely be, there will almost certainly be a deal with Kojima, because they've moved forward with that deal. It seems like everything's kind of fallen into place, and it will be finalized very soon, and they will be able to start talking about that. There was like light talks about maybe getting stuff rushed and done so they could talk about it at E3. So it's like at that point where like they thought it was possible to get stuff in place that quickly with Kojima. So the fact that they realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to happen, and everyone's like, well, of course it's not. This stuff's still going to take a little bit more time. But the point is, it's just a little bit more time, and now they can start looking and say, hey, where are we going to reveal that? Will that be a Tokyo Game Show? Will that be at the Game Awards? It seems like the likely one, but yeah. And Kojima is definitely still a big part of Microsoft's Japanese strategy, and again, that's not all about necessarily just appealing to Japan. It is like, if it was just about appealing to Japan, Microsoft wouldn't be making a lot of these deals and wouldn't be making a lot of these moves. They understand like that's important, but these deals they have ripple effects throughout the entire globe. Kojima's has worldwide appeal. A lot of Konami, if that's something that could happen, Konami's IP has appeal around the globe, and it's the kind of stuff you put in Game Pass, and it makes a difference. And it's not just Dragon Quest on the banner in Japan. They've started like making Dragon Quest a bigger deal everywhere because more people are trying it than ever because of something like Game Pass. And so it's the kind of thing that can fill out their content. And I know that like Kojima continues to be a huge focus for them in terms of, this is how we are going to use this Japanese talent to appeal to people. I just, if it works out well, and also if other Japanese creators see it working well for Kojima, I think a lot of these other discussions that might be happening right now might be like, oh, okay, we don't want to miss out on this. Like, yeah, like we know we could always go and publish our games on Nintendo and do pretty well. We know that maybe if we're making a big enough game, we can get the attention of Sony and maybe have a lot of success on PlayStation. But Microsoft is courting us right now and making a big deal out of it. And we also get the placement on this Game Pass service. And a lot of people are going to play our game. And a lot of people are going to play our game outside of Japan. And I think Kojima might act like a key to make a lot of that other stuff fall in place. So I think we'll probably hear about that deal first. And then once all that happens, maybe some of these other things actually click into place for Microsoft, and they're able to announce them pretty quickly in quick succession.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Got to give a quick shout out to the 400 people hanging with us. If you guys are digging the show, hit that like button, share it out. Let's see how big we can get this party rocking. Yeah, one of the first episodes you were on, we were talking about the Phil Spencer shelf conspiracies. Yes. And that was the first time that we saw the Luden statue just right next to that massive glowing Xbox logo. And back then we were like, there's no way that this is a coincidence. There's no way that you do that just casually if you have no plans or nothing in the works. Like the way that Phil Spencer and the way that those shelves have been playing out, they just wouldn't do that. There was no world where Phil Spencer would randomly have a Luden's figurine on his shelf sitting next to an Xbox logo. There was no way. So since then, there's been a lot of speculation, as you've reported on GamesBeat. At this point, it's going to be a reality at some point. I imagine, and this is just a get hype moment, but I imagine Game Awards are going to be the place to do it. It's at the Microsoft Theater. Imagine the hype moment of Jeff Keighley bringing out Phil Spencer on the stage, talking about, this exciting new collaboration, and we're excited to announce a partnership with someone we haven't historically worked with. And then imagine that Kojima comes out on stage and they're like, I'm stoked to be working with Phil Spencer and Xbox. Here's how they've helped me bring my dream to life. And here's what my dream is. And they show the next Kojima project. Some people in the Xbox camp try to write off Kojima. And this move isn't for you. This move is for the people who love Kojima.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who do.
Yeah, and it's even if you're trying to write him off, it's still someone that you feel like worthy of spending time trying to write off. Like it's a name that matters one way or the other. Whether it's because you play his games or because everyone always talks about him or because he can like command so much of attention even when he's not even trying to by like people just coming up with conspiracy theories on his behalf. He is a person that matters in gaming, and you put him up on a stage and say, hey, we're working with him and we're going to empower him to make the games he wants to make and give him the technology he needs to do it and help him with talent and stuff and make sure that he can actually see it through to the end. It's a lot of stuff that even if they don't have a game to show at that time when they announce this stuff, which they almost certainly will not have because it's very early in the process. Just bringing Kojima out and maybe having him stand next to Phil Spencer, that's the kind of thing that can make a big deal.
Yeah, that shows the Xbox's commitment to Japan. And again, like you talked about, Kojima is a big deal when it comes to having maybe more Japanese developers and industry figures look at Xbox and say, if Kojima sees value in what they're doing, like maybe we need to have these conversations and see what they can do. Because I imagine if you're Phil Spencer, if you're Xbox, you are going to these people and you're saying, these are the resources we have. What is something you want to do? What is a project you've always wanted to do that you haven't been able to do? And I think, with Kojima and the cloud-based gaming thing, there's not a lot of companies who can facilitate that. There was the talks of Google Stadia and some project with Kojima there. Obviously, that was their whole infrastructure was cloud streaming. But if you're Kojima and you want to make a cloud-based game, you're probably not going to PlayStation. They don't have the infrastructure to support something like that.
Right. There's a possibility. I think that one of the reasons Kojima wants to work on a cloud-based game is also because that's the people that might be willing to fund him right now. It's the people with cloud infrastructure, like Google at first, and now Microsoft. I think. He wasn't even considering Sony because I think Sony's might not necessarily want to work with him on his next game. You would think that if they wanted to, they would have made it happen right after Death Stranding. They would have locked that in immediately, and they probably would have had like first right of refusal after helping him with that. So to me, it seems like maybe they refused it and said, hey, okay, yeah, good luck with that. Go work with Google or Microsoft. We don't care. And that doesn't mean that like, if Kojima comes up with another pitch while he's working on this, he could always go take that back to Sony and make another game with them. But if Microsoft treats him right, he probably won't. He'll probably just keep trying to work with Microsoft. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, there's a potential here where if things go well and Kojima's happy, Xbox is happy, maybe he has no need to even reach out to PlayStation. I think right now there's no reason to believe that he would never work with PlayStation again and that it's going to be an exclusive only. But let's say things go perfectly and Kojima's like, I've never had an experience developing a game this easy. And I've never been able to have these sort of resources without, the oversight. Because that's one thing that I've heard from a lot of developers is that Xbox, when you're partnering with them, there's not a lot of micromanaging for the most part. So you get to fundamentally make the game you want, for better or worse. Historically, they've had some games that have been, probably could have used a little more oversight. But if you're someone like Kojima who just wants to have these wild ideas, and I want a company to facilitate those wild ideas, and I think Xbox right now is probably the best place to make a Kojima-ass Kojima game.
Yes, I think so. I think you're right. I think that the Microsoft's very much about empowering its creators right now to make their game ass games, and Kojima could be right in line to be the next person to capitalize on that and take advantage of that and create something that his fans will really like. Again, what that looks like, it seems like very, very few people actually know. My guess would be it's going to be closer to Flight Simulator in terms of streaming in assets from the cloud that would just be too huge to exist, and then probably some other tricks as well, but not necessarily. This is not just about like, oh, he's just going to stream a game to you from the cloud, like xCloud. It's going to be something about like the fundamental bones of this game are going to live out on a server, and as you bring it in, it's going to be able to enable you and probably some other players playing at the same time to take advantage of it in some creative ways. But I'm at a loss for understanding it because I feel like he probably hasn't even fully pitched the specific idea to Microsoft yet. Like it's not even at that point. So
Yeah,
I can't wait to see, but who knows?
yeah. When you look at some of the stuff he's done historically, I forget the name on it right now, but I think it was a DS or Game Boy Advance game, even like about hunting vampires, and there was basically like a solar component to the game cartridge.
Boktai.
Boktai. So you had to basically charge it out in the sun so you could play the game at night. Like that is where Kojima's mind is at when it comes to out of the box game design. So I'm really, really curious to see what a cloud-based Kojima game would be, and what his vision for bringing stuff that can only exist in the cloud into a game. So yeah, again, just let Kojima go wild and let's see what happens.
Right. Like, just give him this chance to go wild. Like, for Microsoft, it's almost what can it hurt? Like, yeah, it's gonna be a few tens of millions of dollars. Like, but for Microsoft, that is like that's not gonna hurt. Actually, let's see. Maybe it turns into something really huge. Maybe it's like our next Minecraft or something. It's probably not going to be, but let's be the place where maybe that could happen here. And maybe that could happen. Maybe we have the next like the Minecraft of the cloud, and we're not going to get that by just sitting back and hoping someone else makes it, and then we can go out and buy them. Let's try to facilitate someone to do that stuff, and yeah, I think that's an important way for them to treat this next 10 years of producing games is be aggressive in empowering creators, and I want to see what that looks like.
Absolutely, because you know that like Xbox right now, they want all of the best developers and all of the best publishers in the world to look at Xbox and say like, hey, they have a track record. These guys are facilitating great games. Like we need to be working with them. Not like, hey, we want to work with them. It might be cool. They want to be in a position where you need to work with Xbox. And if they, give someone like Kojima resources to make a ridiculous game, let's say that, like you said, they just let him go wild and he does whatever he wants to do, and it ends up landing. The next Kojima game is considered his best work ever. And he comes out and says, hey, like because of this partnership with Xbox, I was able to do exactly what I wanted. And this is why this game exists. If you have a figure like Kojima come out and say that about your platform, that's going to be hard to ignore if you're a creator.
Yep, I agree, and I just at this point I'm like, man, I want it to happen so I can like have it off my books of like this is something I reported and hasn't been confirmed yet. But so let's get that out of the way. But also I just I don't know. They've got Microsoft's got a lot of cool games in the works, and it would be cool to see like yet another one that feels very different from the next. I think that we look at Microsoft's sort of strategy, and they have a lot of stuff on lock. They have the first-person shooters; they're fine on that. Western RPGs, more than fine on that.
Yeah.
So where are they reaching right now? They're reaching for variety. They're reaching for places where they can. Present people on Game Pass games that are different than the things that they have on lock, and that's been a lot of like reaching out to Japanese developers and getting Japanese RPGs, and that's working out for them really well. And I think they're like, okay, every time we try to bring in something new to this service, a lot of people are trying it for the first time and realizing it's their jam, and so we have to keep looking for that variety, and maybe we should actually be paying for that ourselves up front and ensuring that maybe no one's making this kind of game. Let's let someone try to do that, and who has that idea? Kojima. It all just it fits so well with what Kojima probably wants to be doing. It fits well with what Microsoft needs in terms of big name games that make a splash, that get people to want to subscribe to Game Pass, but also the game could be different and creates new kinds of players, of people who already subscribed to Game Pass and try something new, and now they are looking for all kinds of other stuff, and that means every game you bring into Game Pass has a better chance of succeeding. It all just feeds into itself in a way that is really exciting.
Yeah. Again, I always joke about how like I'm paid to talk about Game Pass on the show, but I believe in what Game Pass offers creators, because that's something for me. I'm super empathetic to the creative process. And I hate hearing about people who have to make a game with a specific set of metrics, because if they don't, their company goes out of business. They're firing people. They're closing their doors because the game that they put out and the game that they wanted to make it wasn't marketable enough. And hearing stuff like that sucks. So when you have people, again, like Tim Schafer, Kojima, people who've historically been very creative and have taken a lot of risks, talking about how Game Pass empowers them to take more risks, that's exciting. For any, like, I don't care what platform you prefer, like, you should be looking at that if you're someone who's passionate about, you know, the gaming as a genre and not a console war fanboy thing, because these people are telling you that they get to make the games they want because of this. And
Yep.
you know, if Xbox isn't making money right now, that doesn't hurt you. It does not matter to you at all.
Well, it's concern trolling. It's a lot of concern trolling. A lot of that stuff. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and the people that like seem to talk about Game Pass more than anyone else are people who are skeptical of it, and they're just just worried that they're not making money. Excuse me, and I'm just worried that people aren't finishing games. Oh, are you? Is that something you've ever cared about before now? It's concern trolling, and they build their entire personalities around it, and whatever. You know, it's, you got to make your content however you're going to make your content. But I just don't believe you. I don't believe your concerns here. I think that the reality is like, you can make a choice right now as a consumer and say, is this something I think I'm going to get my money's worth? And it's hard to argue that it's not worth the value. That's why that's never the conversation. That is why it is a concern troll, because you have to come up with all these other reasons why. Oh, but aren't they going to raise the price on you someday? Well, maybe, but they're not right now. Why are you talking about? Why do you care? It's what if you say, oh, Starfield's coming. What if Starfield's not good? Well, I mean, what if a meteorite comes down and smashes Phil Spencer on the head? Like,
Jesus, Jeff.
What ifs. There's a lot of what ifs we could come up with, though. It's exhausting. Right now, today, is this service worth the money? And almost across the board, most people are saying yes. And if they're not saying yes right now, they are looking ahead and saying there's a lot of stuff happening over at Microsoft that I'm becoming very interested in. And it's hard to argue that side, so they don't even try. They have to come up with all this other stuff, and it bothers me.
I feel the same way when people say, but people aren't buying the games. I just want to support the developers. Like, okay, if you want to support the developers, I've talked to countless developers who are absolutely stoked that their game is in Game Pass. More people than ever are playing their game. Their game is getting more attention than ever, getting more eyes on it. People are talking about it.
They're making another game, and they're releasing that second game in Game Pass as well, which, come on, there's no better indicator for how developers feel about Game Pass than that. If they do a game in Game Pass, it does well, they make a new game, and then they go right to Microsoft and say, hey, do you want to put it back in Game Pass? Clearly we don't have a good insight into exactly how these numbers are working and exactly what everything looks like, but that behavior right there says a lot, and it's clearly developers are appreciating it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not seen a single developer come out publicly and say that their experience with Xbox Game Pass was negative. I have literally not seen a single one.
I think that Microsoft goes to extreme lengths to ensure that's not the case. I think they, they have a lot of account managers that make sure that people are feeling happy. I mean, if they're, I can't remember his name right now, but the guy that publishes Descenders, he's on Twitter. He talks about.
He's been very vocal.
Stuff a lot. Mike Rose.
I want to say. Right. I think Rose is the last name. I think it might be Mike. Yeah.
But he talks about this stuff, and he's like, we think about the way people buy games a lot, and here's the issues with Steam, here's the issues with all these platforms. I love Game Pass is how he puts it.
Yeah,
like, we love it, and it's okay. It just feels like developers don't really have those complaints. They must be getting all the attention that they are missing on some of the other platforms, and they must be getting a lot of the money that they think their game is worth in the market. And it's like, okay, so you get those two things, and it seems like developers are going to get on your side, and it's working out well for them.
Yeah, because let's talk about some PlayStation versus Xbox dynamics that have come up recently with the whole Platform X discussions. You had a developer talking about how, like, their games get no exposure unless they pay a ton of money to get that exposure. $25,000 was the figure thrown around, and it's marketing. I understand that aspect of it. PlayStation has market share. They can flex those numbers, and they can say, if you're not going to pay, somebody else will, which is whatever. That's their prerogative. They have every right to do that. On the other hand, you have Xbox Game Pass that not only are these developers not paying for this exposure, they are getting paid for free exposure.
Yeah.
They are getting a lump sum of money to showcase their game in Xbox Game Pass, have more people play it than ever, have more eyes on it than ever, because normally it's a blog post, it's a Twitter post, it's a spread, it's featured in the Game Pass app. There is so much attention on your game when you release it into Xbox Game Pass. By default, it doesn't matter how big it is, if it's a AAA game, if it's an indie game, you're getting free exposure and you're getting paid for it. So that is a stark contrast. If you're an indie developer, you are looking at that, and that looks really enticing versus PlayStation, who's charging you if you want to be featured on the store.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of stores charge, like you said, that's marketing. That's pretty standard. It just sounds like that's the only recourse you have in a lot of cases on PSN, and that would seem to be the issue. Like, there are tools that these publishers can create, or these platform holders could create to help developers help themselves. And if you don't have those tools, well, then you can put account managers or whatever in charge of games and help those, and have those account managers help those games reach their potential. It sounds like the issue with PSN is they don't have either of those things, really. Some games have account managers, but they are like the high echelon games, and these games are determined by an evaluation process that is a black box that the developers don't understand and cannot have any say in and can't change. And the only way they can change it, once it happens, is then you have to pay the money. And that's where it could feel like a little unfair, because it's like, well, listen, we're an indie developer. We don't have $25,000 to pay for a placement. Can we just like try to make this happen ourselves? It's like, well, no, Sony doesn't have the tools to enable. So it's like, what are you supposed to do there? This is why some developers, I think, get in a situation where they're like, we are selling less on PlayStation than we do on Steam, because on Steam you could control your sale price,
exactly,
and you have a lot more control over like your community there. On Switch you could control your sale price, and that's why you see a lot of people do. Like, Switch is really crowded. A lot of games come to it. A lot of indie games. It's kind of a mess of a store. And yet people are finding these games because developers feel like they have just enough tools to manipulate things and get in front of people. And it seems to be working. A lot of developers selling a lot of games on Switch. On PlayStation, you don't get those same options to control your price at any time. You have to get invited for sales, and those invites are very limited. And it's challenging for indie developers. And Microsoft, I'm sure, the ID at Xbox program, very hands-on. I'm sure that they have a lot of, like I said, a lot of account managers there trying to make sure these games can reach their potential. They also seem to have pretty good tools. But then on top of that, like you said, if you do get into Game Pass, you are being paid to let Microsoft promote your game, and Microsoft will want to promote your game. It's just it's flipped on its head. And we saw, I was surprised to see the chart, some of those charts where, I was expecting Xbox to be pretty low in terms of the size of the pie. And it was like not that far behind the Switch in some cases. And that was very surprising to me. And I'm like, does that include some like money from Game Pass? Maybe it does. But if it does, still, like that's like a really good thing for these developers, like making that much money on Xbox. It's like, that's not how it was a few years ago. So clearly some really good moves. You wonder if, like, okay, the idea, if that has been making a dent. That sort of thing. It's like, oh, it has been making a dent, has been making a difference, and then Game Pass on top of that is only just helping.
Yeah, you talk about a couple years ago and how stark of a difference is. It broke my heart when Yacht Club Games showed the percentage of people who bought Shovel Knight on Xbox versus other platforms. I don't remember the exact figure, but I'm not exaggerating when I say it was like 2 or 3%. Of Shovel Knight sales were on the Xbox platform. And that is in my opinion, one of the best indie games of the last decade by a lot. And to see a game of that caliber, that well received, sell that poorly on Xbox is like, that's hard for indies to look at and be excited. And so it's really cool that we're in a position now where, like you saw with those pie charts, like we assume that Nintendo and PlayStation dominate indie sales because there's more users, generally speaking, on those platforms. Right. But to see that come out and be like, I'm actually making more money on Xbox, way more money on Xbox than I'm making on PlayStation. And again, with that momentum, we have people excited, indie developers excited about working with Xbox. And, some people get obsessed with the AAA games and the bangers, and they try to write off the indie scene. But Game Pass especially, there's going to be months where the indies are carrying the lineup, and we're going to have big, cool, noteworthy indie games dropping in Game Pass to kind of fill that gap. So it's, you know, every single game doesn't have to be AAA. And I think some people try to discredit the value of having an appeal for indie developers.
Right. Just a wild thing to do. It's like you don't like just. It's like saying I don't like video games at a certain point. But you know, the difference there is these developers will continue to put the games out on PlayStation because PlayStation is so huge.
Yeah,
they can't ignore it. So they're going to see through the labyrinthine process of getting these games confirmed and going through the evaluation process and dealing with the back end and these old tools and these tools that are like made for, you know, Vita and PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, and having to do the approval process for a bunch of different, you know, versions of PlayStation and not having everything streamed. They're going to go through all that because in the end, you can't not be on PlayStation. But they're going to happily do it on Xbox and then also have that chance of being on Game Pass, where now their game is just in front of people and they get a big lump sum of money, and it's just a completely different it's like so night and day in terms of the potential to make money on one versus the other, that you know, I expect as we go forward this generation, when it comes to smaller indie games, that association to flip and be very much associated with Xbox when comparing them against PlayStation. Obviously, Switch with the portability is going to continue dominating that. But yeah, I think Game Pass is going to be like number 2 right there in terms of like where I think about I'm going to be playing indie games.
Yeah, got to give a quick shout out to the 500 folks rocking with us. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Again, if you're new to the show, we do this every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Hit that like button, share it out. To your point, we've seen a really interesting shift in PlayStation and Xbox in the indie scene. PlayStation got a ton of respect and notoriety with the PS4 being the place for indie developers to go. And we saw a lot of noteworthy indie developers partnering with PlayStation on exclusive indie titles and big indie titles that were only on PlayStation. I think we are in the resurgence of the exact opposite. We're going to see more and more indie developers excited about Game Pass, excited about Xbox as a platform, and looking at PlayStation saying, are we going to do this? Is it worth it for us versus Xbox to even bother?
Yeah, I think what happens too is these games are going to start catering to Game Pass a little bit, right? Like you start saying, hey, but you know, if Microsoft's willing to pay for us to come on Game Pass, maybe we should be thinking about like making something that could succeed on Game Pass and get a lot of players and like have like a long life and kind of maybe be like a Rocket League or something like that, and try to take that trajectory. But also I think that, you know, Sony's going to continue ignoring anything that's not a major indie game. Like if you're an indie and you're going to get attention from Sony, we see like that Jet the Far Shore. That's from the people that made Super Brothers, Sword and Sorcery. Like they have a lot of prestige, and I bet there's like people within Sony who like remember that game and like wanted to work with this studio. You have to be sort of on that level. You have to be like move the needle internally at Sony. I mean, that's exactly what they said about that evaluation process is. You have to get someone at Sony excited about your game in order to succeed. And I think a lot of indie developers sort of balk at that. I would imagine if like I were to like go say I'm going to start making games, trying to convince someone at a corporation to be into my game so I could sell it is not something that appeals to me. It's not how I think like when I'm making like YouTube content. That's not how I don't want YouTube to have to like my stuff in order to succeed. I want the tools given to me to succeed on my own and try to find that audience on my own. And YouTube does a decent job at that, of giving analytics and understanding that stuff. And I think what's happening here is Microsoft is kind of providing all of those solutions. They're providing those tools for you to succeed on your own if you wish. There's a solution to get into Game Pass and have them and work with them and be paid to get promoted. And then there's also like if you just want to if you are a big indie game and you don't want to go in Game Pass, like Microsoft, the ID at Xbox team is still right there and willing to work with you and willing to promote your game that way or help you figure out ways to promote your game. So it's just like they are covering all their bases there, and it's still indie games. And I know, like you said, a lot of people dismiss it, but it's many of these studios become the big studios of tomorrow. They build and they grow, and creating a foundation where they feel like they can succeed on your platform is going to pay dividends in the long run, I think.
Yes, Jeff, 100%. Again, to circle back to the Bloober thing, people when I talk about Bloober, they're like, Bloober has never done anything on the level of Silent Hill 2. And yes, I agree. Like Silent Hill 2, one of the greatest horror games of all time. They haven't done anything yet. But, you know, it's not impossible for them to get there with the right resources. And that's what a lot of people don't really get about these indie teams is like a lot of these studios don't just magically pop out and the first game they put out is just ridiculous, a masterpiece. Like that's just not the reality. A lot of these, you know, sometimes industry veterans, and you see what Xbox is doing with these teams where they're hiring people who've been in the industry for 30 years. And then a lot of those people, they work at one point in time, probably with an indie studio.
Right.
Or they started their own indie studio. So yes, indie developers are important. We should support them. Death's Door, one of the most anticipated games for me this year. Little indie game, yes. Xbox exclusive.
Yeah, it looks really good. But it's like, you also, if you're Microsoft, can you like rely on Activision and EA to continue making enough games to support like Game Pass? Like even if you started making deals like bring in a lot of Activision games into Game Pass, they're not making a lot of games every year, and you need way more than that to sort of make this thing make sense. And so at a certain point, you know, floating up these smaller teams and enabling them to succeed is not just like, oh, a good business move. It might be necessary to make the entire thing of Game Pass work. So, and I bet indie developers like recognize that to a certain extent and appreciate that and feel like, hey, if we're that important to your platform, obviously we're going to be treated well. And I think that they're seeing that that's the case. So it's going to make a big difference this generation in terms of how those indie developers feel. And I think it'll make a kind of a slight difference in terms of the perception from the gaming public, especially as EA and Activision and all these other publishers release fewer and fewer games. And as these indie games get bigger and bigger and bigger, if it's a big enough indie game, Sony will come knocking. Obviously, I think there's no doubt there. But I think many of those studios, as they kind of get to that point where they're moving from making their first indie game to making their big indie game, they're gonna be like, well, we had such a good relationship with Microsoft, we are not going to mess that up. So I think Microsoft is playing a long game here, like they are in many cases, and it's going to work out well for them.
Mm-hmm. There's be a point where these indie teams that, you know, they put out a game that maybe you weren't obsessed with or it wasn't on your radar, and then they come out with their game, the game that puts them on the map. And they've had this history with Xbox, and their big game is an Xbox exclusive or has some partnership with Xbox, and that's going to be, they're going to have a lot of momentum there if they can again launch that in a Game Pass and leverage that. So again, Game Pass is exciting if you're an indie developer. Developers are talking about it constantly. We're going to transition into the Xbox Game Studios roadmap, which you talked a little bit about this on Grubbsnax this week. But before I do that, I have a bunch of super chats I'm going to get to because you guys have been amazing. Stubbs Gaming coming in with a cool pear sticker. Appreciate that. What else do we got here? Seen quite a few pop in, so really appreciate it. Brian Hopkins, I really hope Microsoft picking up unused properties from Konami is real. Those brands are just wasting away in gaming limbo right now. Yeah, you talked about this. This is something that I've talked about. I don't care who has the rights. If it's PlayStation, if it's Xbox, if it's Nintendo, just please, for the love of God, can we get a new Silent Hill that's good and a new Castlevania that's good? That's all I ask. Yep. I don't give a damn where it's at, if it's exclusive or not. Just let it exist, please.
Yep,
please.
I agree.
L. Paul, Phil said that the company they acquire must have an ability to do PC software. That's not Konami as much as Sega. What are you? Yeah. Well, they can.
Sega's got a lot. It has a huge and successful PC business. Absolutely, PC gaming business. But like being able to do PC software, I mean, does that mean that they have Total War, or does that mean they can release their games and succeed on PC? And Konami could definitely do that. Like that's fine. I mean, the Sega deal, the Sega acquisition is not a thing. I don't think. I still don't think that's a thing. Sega really likes Game Pass. I think they have a close relationship, but I don't think that acquisition is happening. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
I think it's just a good partnership. And Xbox and Sega both agree that this is good for both of us. It's not something where you have to buy us for this to work out. We're having fun. We're having a good relationship. We're going to keep giving you more of our games to put in Game Pass. And I think that's going to be the extent, at least for now. So again, I know people want the Sega.
That's not to say that they're... Yeah, and that's not to say that they're acquiring Konami, but like they're probably if they're going to make a deal with anyone right now, I think it's probably more Konami than Sega in terms of an investment.
Because Xbox understands the power of IP and they understand what they can do with Konami right now. And with Sega, Sega's already working with them. All their biggest IP are coming into Game Pass outside of Persona, maybe hopefully one day. But there's more and more investment from Sega into Xbox Game Pass without Xbox really paying any. I mean, obviously they're paying for the games to come into Game Pass, but they don't have to acquire them to necessarily gain anything major out of this relationship, unless they're trying to get exclusivity for Yakuza, for example.
Right.
Faisal 007, Platinum Games guy still seeking forgiveness from Phil to do Scalebound. Would Xbox invest again in Platinum Games? Scalebound, RIP, RIP. Okay, so there's been a lot of drama with that. So I guess I'll phrase it as: do you ever see a scenario where Scalebound comes back for one, and would Xbox even bother partnering with Platinum Games again?
Yeah. So and the Scalebound's never coming back, and I think Xbox would work with Platinum Games again if the opportunity arose. But I think Platinum's very busy right now. They got a lot going on, and so that's probably still a ways off. But Platinum partners with a lot of people. But I think Platinum's also very interested right now in getting to a point where it's publishing its own games and can exist on its own. And so while it focuses on that, maybe a deal with Microsoft is not something they'd be willing to do at the moment. But I guess I don't know that. I don't know that for sure. So, but these companies will continue doing business with each other. They would just have to like rethink it and restart and not do Scalebound. It wouldn't be Scalebound.
Yeah, because the whole issue with Scalebound is Platinum Games just overcommitted. They had so many projects going on simultaneously, and they just realistically couldn't deliver on what Scalebound was trying to be. And I think if they partnered up again, there would probably be a situation where they're like, hey, we understand what happened last time. It is what it is. But this time around, like, you guys need to be able to commit to us, and we can't have this game be in development for several years and then it not come out.
Yep.
Brian Hopkins again with the super chat says, imagine a game like Metal Gear 5. If Kojima hadn't had someone breathing down his neck about the budget, it would be big.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily for sure what the kind of game he's going to make with Microsoft, but I agree that is an exciting notion.
Again, like I'm an advocate for weird games and people making weird shit, and Kojima is kind of one of the most prominent weird developers in the industry right now. So I don't love every single one of his games. Like Death Stranding, I did not love. Wasn't necessarily for me. That being said, I will be first in line for whatever his next wild project is, because I want to see what the dude comes up with. So yes, give him a sack of money and let him go nuts. That's the moral of the story here.
Yep. Agreed. Yep.
Super chat from Cadaver. What do you guys think of this? Xbox expanding into multiple regions with publishers for studio acquisitions. One in the US, Bethesda. One in Europe, Avalanche or Focus Home. And one in Japan, Sega. We're gonna circle back on this. We're gonna talk about some acquisitions towards the end here. So Cadaver, appreciate this, and we will definitely circle back on this strategy with Xbox towards the end. Super chat from Nick Turbo, appreciate it. Last Emperor, appreciate it. Harjeet Chani, Game Pass is already profitable. Is PS Now? Game Pass price could go up. Sony increased price on all games. Damn. So Harjeet throwing some shade on Sony's practices.
I wouldn't say Game Pass is profitable because they're going to reinvest any money they make. They're going to reinvest into new deals.
Yes,
and so that money's it's a revolving door. So it is making enough money to make those deals continue to make sense. Is how I would put it.
Exactly. It's one of those things where Microsoft is heavily in investment mode, as they've told us. So that's why they're buying studios.
User acquisition mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So Xbox is making money. It's not that they're not making money, but a lot of the money they're making is going into making more money down the road. So yeah, it's hard to say right now if we had a spreadsheet of all the numbers, it's hard to say that Xbox Game Pass is profitable on paper right now. If you factor in 7.5 billion for Bethesda, things like that, which they're saying this is for Game Pass.
Yep. And they wouldn't even want it to necessarily be profitable right now, because it's not about being profitable at like 20 to 25 million users. It's about getting to a point where you have 35 to 50 million users, and then you can start taking some profit at that point, taking a little money out of it, treating it like an ATM at that point. But for now, they just got to keep growing it.
Exactly. Super chat from Last Emperor says, Geralt versus Superman. Who wins? I have Geralt.
Yep. I'll take Geralt. Yeah, he'll figure it out.
Yeah, better hair for sure, and a better beard. So in that camp, yeah, gotta give it to Geralt. Okay. So all right, let's talk a little bit about Xbox Game Studios in 2022 and beyond. Right before E3, they had this kind of press-focused basically presentation where they talked about Xbox being all in on gaming, and they talked about how Xbox is going to have at least one major AAA first-party game per quarter moving forward. So my question after that was, when are they going to start delivering on this cadence? We've heard that once per quarter thing before. It's not the first time that this has been brought up. So looking at 2022, my question to you, Jeff, is 2022 the year that they say we have one major AAA first-party game per quarter? Are they going to come out in January, give you a breakdown of their roadmap and say, these are the 4 AAA games we're giving you this year? Is that happening in 2022?
I think that they say that in 2022, but it's a little bit of a cheat because I think it's going to be the first quarter probably won't. But then the second, third, and fourth quarter will have, Redfall, Forza Horizon, or Forza Motorsport 8, and then Starfield. And then you have that, and then you go into 2023, and at that point, they're set. Like, there's no doubt that they'll be able to, maybe every game gets delayed, but it's much easier for them to hit that one massive game per quarter cadence at the end by 2023. So they really just got to, like I keep saying, they just got to get to E3 2022, because they can start talking about that, what's coming in 2023, and Redfall should be coming out that summer, right around that time, and they could say, and now here's Forza Motorsport 8 and Starfield for later this year, and they're huge, and whatever other third-party deals we make or Game Pass deals we make, and then here's 2023, which is going to have game after game, like all of the big games. Perfect Dark is currently internally scheduled for 2023, and so is Avowed, and just massive game after massive game. They think Everwild might come out in 2023. Probably not. Almost certainly not. But right now, that's like on the schedule for then. But by then, they could easily start hitting that cadence. I just think that we got to kind of get past this last hump of not having a game in the early part of 2022, and then they're going to be fine.
Yeah, because if we look at the slate for next year, they probably could have 4 AAA third-party games for 2022. But there's a huge gap from Halo Infinite to Redfall in the summer, which is that July, is that August? There's potentially a 7 to 9 month gap right now for AAA first-party. So would you count, let's say Grounded 1.0 comes out and they use that to cheat, and that's their first quarter release. That's their first party release. As they say, Grounded 1.0 is out. Does that count, or is that cheating?
Well, I think it's going to count. Like, they're probably going to count it, but it's still kind of a bit of a cheat because it's a game we played in early access, right? And things like that. But yes, like Grounded 1.0 definitely going to hit next year, and so you're right. They could do that and start hitting that and be like, okay, we're sort of limping off the starting line here a little bit because you've already played this game, but here it is in 1.0 form. Now a lot of people are going to try it for the first time, so we're going to count that, and then in the summer, Redfall, in early fall, maybe Forza, and then Starfield in November. I think that's a good start to like this cadence. And then like this is not even everything, but I'm like my list for 2023. Like this is Microsoft's internal list. It's Perfect Dark, Contraband, Coalition's non-Gears of War project. They're the one where they're experimenting with Unreal 5, Everwild, Avowed, Fable, and In Exile's next game. And there's a couple more that I didn't have on this list here. I think I have in my article where I wrote about this. But Hellblade 2 and Compulsion's next thing. That's right. That's what it was. And so that's a lot for 2023. Obviously, we know some of that stuff's going to fall to 2024. But even if most of that stuff falls, that they could still easily have 4 of those games make it that year. And I think this is probably still not quite everything we probably don't know about everything yet still. I think we'll probably get a few more surprises at E3 next year. The Game Awards this year, maybe even. Yeah, I by 2023, if we are still talking about can they hit this cadence, something has gone catastrophically wrong. They should have no issue by then of feeling like we are getting regular massive hits for Game Pass. And whether or not they come out in their quality, that's one thing, but they are clearly tent poles, and whether or not they can hold up to 10 is another argument, but they're supposed to. And I think that we could talk about the quality once we get to them, but for right now, they are games absolutely to look forward to and say this is stuff that can hold up the rest of the Game Pass lineup. But yeah, I think by 2023 this is not going to be an issue at all. And by the end of 2022, if Starfield really hits really well, if people are still playing Redfall, the people are going to be feeling pretty good about it, I think, overall.
Yeah, I think at this point in my mind, there's no doubt that 2023 will be the year that they absolutely crush that one per quarter. They give you no cheating right. First quarter. They give you 4 brand new AAA exclusives from Xbox per quarter that hit in a big way. 2023, I think, is absolutely going to deliver that. And I think E3 2022 has the potential for at least diehard Xbox fans to be that kind of PlayStation E3 of dreams. Like if you're obsessed with Western RPGs, there's a potential where E3 2022, we see a Fable gameplay trailer. We see an Avowed gameplay trailer. We see a Perfect Dark gameplay trailer. We see a Contraband gameplay trailer. We see a ton of gameplay trailers for games that people are going to go, oh shit, like Xbox has something for me. I'm excited about this. This looks rad as hell. So E3 2022 is going to be, or it should be, I won't say it's going to be. Xbox, for the most part, has good momentum, but they've blundered some presentations in the past. Yes. It should be the mission statement for this is us now. This is what our future looks like. Right. You can expect this every year. This is us every single year. We're delivering on this level.
Yep, I think so, and I think they clearly know how to do presentations now, and they know how important gameplay is. It's and they're going to want to go into next E3 and say, listen, we're going to plant a flag in the ground right now that this game and this game and this game are all going to be in the conversation for Game of the Year for next year. So we want to start that conversation right now, and we don't want to be shy about it. We want to be upfront that we care about that we think our games are that good, and that we can see through that goal. It's something that I think they started this year. I think they're confident about stuff like Starfield. But they want to come out with gameplay that's going to blow people away, and they want to do it at E3s, and and they have the content now to do that in terms of the amount of stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, it's just a huge list for stuff that's coming in 2023. It's like they're going to get to a point where it could be every 2 months there is something massive. By the time you are done talking about, by the time you feel like, oh, hey, are people getting sick of this game? Oh, there's another thing. There's another thing right here. So let's start talking about that. It's going to be, you're going to have Game Pass. It's going to be, you can't ignore it at that point. I think that that's the big thing for them right now is let's just keep this steady growth for Game Pass. Like it's pretty respectable. But sometimes it has dips. Like right before E3, I think there was some anxiousness at Microsoft about the trajectory of adoption for Game Pass. They were worried about it. It wasn't quite getting enough people coming in every day. A lot of the dollar deals had expired. That stuff wasn't going on anymore. And they're like, okay, let's see if we can sort of goose this coming out of E3. And I think E3 did a really good job for them where like, hey, everyone's really excited about this stuff. Let's start some more promotions, get those numbers building up and just steadily build up until the games are the thing that people can't ignore. And then it's going to just be this self-fulfilling prophecy of just, you can't ignore Game Pass. So they're well on their way to that point.
Yeah. Again, Xbox has had some notable first-party AAA games in Xbox Game Pass, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're comparing directly to PlayStation and Nintendo and their first-party output, some people could make the argument that they haven't had anything on that level. They haven't had the Game of the Year contenders come in and drop in Game Pass. But when those start landing, and when you have Xbox in the conversations with not one title, but they have potentially multiple titles dropping in the same year that are all up for Game of the Year, that's going to make it really hard to criticize Game Pass as filler, whatever, double A, when a lot of these big games from Xbox are Game of the Year contenders. As we've seen with Hellblade and Fable, they are getting all the time and resources that they need so that when this game comes out and when they show this game for the first time in the big way, people know what this is going to be and they know how big this is going to be. So Xbox, again, they look at criticism and feedback probably more, critically and obsessively than a lot of other companies, maybe to a fault.
Absolutely.
But they understand everyone's narrative that Xbox has no games or Xbox can't put out games that are on this caliber. And they know that. They hear that, they understand that, and they will absolutely correct that. And I think
it's serving them well right now, right? Like that paying attention and understanding the criticisms helped formulate that E3 that we just got, that most people seem very happy with, at least in terms of how things were presented. Even if the games weren't what you personally wanted, they still did it in a way that was super entertaining, and they were able to do that because they listened. They made mistake after mistake in terms of how they were doing their presentations, and then finally everything clicked because they just kept trying to get better and they cared about getting better. If they take that same approach to all of the things they're doing with Game Pass and Microsoft or in Xbox and the hardware and the controller and everything, if they just keep listening on that level, it's going to be kind of they're going to be able to help themselves from just accomplishing what they want to accomplish here. It's going to just sort of happen because that seems to be working for them really well right now.
Yeah. Again, it's like this is an Xbox show, so every time I say something like this, I feel like somebody's cringing or saying that I'm disingenuous, but I've honestly never been more excited about what Xbox is doing. As someone who loves gaming, who has been playing gaming for close to 30 years now, like gaming is a huge part of my life. Like I go where the games are. I have a PlayStation, I have an Xbox, I have a Nintendo, I have a PC. I can look at what Xbox is doing and I can look at the people at Xbox. And I legitimately feel like they understand what is special about gaming and how they can use their mass amounts of wealth to better the industry for players and developers. And that's special. Like when you have that much money, you could easily be the evil supervillain. When you're Microsoft, you could easily just be evil and gross and greedy. And that's, again, not at least publicly what I feel about Xbox. I feel like they're doing a lot of the right things and they're really pushing to have great games. And that's exciting. No matter who you are, again, like if you prefer PlayStation, that's cool. I don't care. If you prefer Nintendo, that's cool. But I feel like
Nintendo.
Yeah, like at this point, like if you love gaming, how do you look at Xbox and say, I don't care about what they're doing?
I mean, and again, they're just going to make it so you can't ignore them. I think right now you could still sort of say, I'll ignore him. I can play MLB The Show on PlayStation or whatever. But it's just going to make so much. They're already really good at making noise. That's the thing about Xbox right now is they're good at getting headlines. They're good at getting everyone on every podcast to talk about their whatever like new news announcement they want to make. Every conversation on every podcast almost always sort of devolves into Game Pass. Like everyone's like, okay,
whether you want it to be or not, whether you
want it to or not, it's like, okay, then Microsoft's over here doing Game Pass, and what does that mean? Every conversation goes there. Microsoft's very good at like sort of just kind of shifting themselves into the conversation at all times. And then their social media team's very good. People are excited. They make it fun to talk about Xbox on social media, so people do that. If they're good at making noise right now, when the biggest points of conversation are like some interesting moves on the business side or getting the occasional big day one Game Pass thing, once they start getting those games out, like Starfield, and once they get into 2023 and it's Perfect Dark, Avowed, Fable, bam, 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 nonstop, it's going to be so loud that most people are just gonna be like, they're going to give in. I think. Like you're going to relent at a certain point. Just be like, either go with the flow, or what's your other option at a certain point? Just continue to be the one person yelling about how Game Pass is going to be bad in some ways in the future, in all your like imagined anxieties. Okay, have fun with that. We're all over here playing game after game after game, and for one low price, it's just it's so hard to ignore at that point that I think it seems inevitable.
Yes, cue the Thanos meme. But it's one of those things. Like I think about Game Pass on the same way that I look at like Netflix and I look at services like Spotify and YouTube Music and these like streaming services that have, for me, fundamentally changed the way that I engage with that media. I used to buy physical discs constantly. I used to be someone going to the record store every Friday buying the new release. Movies, same way. I used to buy a lot of new release movies. Tuesdays, I was like, yes, all right, new releases are coming out, let's go. That has completely changed. And the way that I consume music and movies has completely changed. And Game Pass is doing that for the gaming industry. And obviously, when there's new things like that, there's some disruption. And you have the people who just want the physical media. And that's, it's probably a collector's mentality. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that'll necessarily go away in the short term, at least. But for me, going from Game Pass and then looking at, like, again, I don't want to make this a PlayStation versus Xbox thing, but having Game Pass and then going and be like, oh, I want to play Ratchet and Clank. That looks sick. And then I go to the store and it's like, oh, it's $70. It's okay. I mean, I guess I'll do it, but
you can't ignore that stuff. You can't, like, it's so and people are like, what's wrong with spending money on your games, and what's wrong with buying your games? And it's nothing other than I hate spending money, like every single creature on this earth. I mean, that's the whole point. You're supposed to get the most you can. Like, our system is set up so you get the most for as little as possible. The people creating this stuff have that same mentality. The people that pay you at your job, they want to get your time for as little as money as possible.
Yeah,
and then you have to go out in the world and you have to try to get stuff from people who are trying to sell something to you for as much money as possible by putting the least amount of effort into it. And it's constantly, you're thinking about this at all times, subconsciously, more likely than not. And so, like, spending $70, and especially when you're so used to paying $60, it stings. It absolutely stings. And it's something that if you are fine with, that's fine. I don't have an issue with you having an issue, like, or not having a problem. But I still think spending a lot of money is something that I balk at a lot of times. And when there's another option out there that clearly, lubricates my game playing life, I'm going to compare it to that every single time. And that's kind of the idea. I mean, like, I always bring up the medium popcorn example of, like, you think about the comparison more than you think about the actual price. You think about, oh, it's only 20 cents more to get a large popcorn. You're not thinking about the fact that it's $9.
Yeah.
And I think that right now Game Pass is absolutely taking advantage of that, where you look at $70 and then you look at $15 per month, and I mean, one definitely looks better than the other, especially when you're getting all this other stuff with it. So we live in that comparison. We live that comparison, and that is unavoidable. So we're gonna have to just keep making it, because that's the reality.
Exactly. I understand for some people $70 is whatever, and you can buy a $70 game and it doesn't matter to you, and you move on with your life like nothing happens. For some people, that's a lot. I have a lot of people, especially reaching out to me on Twitter from other countries, and they're like, yo, this $10 isn't equivalent. Like, $10 for you in the US is like, this is like a $30 increase for us over here. So, like, we're paying $110 for these games. And, like, that's tough. Places where it's more expensive and the minimum wage is lower, like, it affects more people than some people want to give it credit for. But money's money. Yeah, when you get used to not paying money and then you have to pay money, you don't want to pay money. And I think that's just human nature. I don't call me old-fashioned, but I'm going to get to some super chats here. Quick shout out to the 580 people hanging. I see Yodani in the chat. I see Paris. What up, dude? I see Gaz in here. That absolute clown, Fonzarelli. Super chat from Mr. Joanna Dark says, hello, Miles and Jeff. Big fan. Enjoy your 24/7 trolling on Twitter. I just wanted to drop in and show my support. Appreciate you, dog. And we got one from Gaz. Wear the sauce shirt, Jeff.
It's upstairs in my closet. I meant to wear it on my podcast yesterday, but we got sent our Arby's stuff, so I did this instead. So sorry, man.
Sorry, bro. Sorry. The Arby's takes precedence over the sauce, but I guess ironically, you can't really have Arby's without the sauce.
That's right. You can't. No, I would never.
Okay, so now let's get into the constant obsession, the constant conversation, the ongoing, never-ending discussion regarding Xbox acquisitions, Jeff. It's acquisition season. Xbox is
Apparently.
buying everyone in the world. I want to talk about it because we had my good pal Jez Corden on the old Xbox 2 yesterday was saying that there's documentation floating around that shows that NetherRealm and TT Games are for sale. They're on the market. Earlier this year, I think it was earlier this year, there was the conversations of WB as a whole trying to sell, and that Microsoft and Xbox were one of the companies looking at what WB had to offer. That deal fell through. I ultimately felt that WB as it was not a compelling offer. There wasn't a huge incentive to buy all of WB. But now that there's some potential for these satellites, like say a NetherRealm and a TT Games, I feel like that's probably more enticing for Xbox. So Jeff, what are your thoughts on NetherRealm and TT joining Xbox? What would they add, and will Xbox buy them?
So I think that there's a good chance this stuff does actually happen. I don't know for sure, but NetherRealm is a very lucrative studio. It would provide a fighting game, like a way to get regular fighting games into Game Pass that are massive, that are huge, and that would make a big difference for Microsoft in terms of appealing to that audience. And then TT Games makes family games, another thing that Microsoft could really use.
Yes.
And it all fits. More than that, Matt Booty used to be in charge of a significant portion of WB Games. He's very, very familiar with these studios. He knows their strengths. He knows the talent. He knows what they're capable of. The cadence that they can work at, the kinds of games they can deliver, the kinds of deals that they're comfortable making. I'm sure that he's fully familiar with Ed Boon's ability to make huge deals happen and get these things done. And so I think that familiarity is going to help here and maybe make this stuff happen quicker and more sooner than we expect. And that's actually one of the reasons I'm so confident is because of that familiarity. You talked about like the old WB deal and why that. I think what happened there is Matt Booty was familiar with this entire package and understood all of the baggage that would come with it of not getting a lot of these IPs, and then also still having to pay this, thousands of people's salaries, and like then have to go out and figure out like, okay, now what are these? What is everyone going to work on? It just didn't make a lot of sense. I think, scaling it down to these two studios makes a little bit more sense because TT Games would more than likely come with the deal to make Lego stuff. That's something that would probably shift over. I think that WB and Discovery would probably keep the movie rights, but the video game rights would probably go with TT. And then for NetherRealm, even if they just come with Mortal Kombat, that's more than enough. But they would likely be able to keep Injustice or something like that, or do something entirely new and maybe be able to make like a Marvel thing. Because we know that Marvel wants to work with more studios, more publishers, especially like big publishers like Sony. They want to do a similar deal with Microsoft. They've done a deal with Nintendo, and so if that's on the table, maybe this is a chance to make that happen instead. So these can fit into the way things are moving right now for everyone involved, and so I wouldn't be surprised if this is exactly what happens. Also, I just don't know if Discovery wants to keep these studios. That I'm not surprised to hear that they're up for sale, and then it's just a matter of excuse me, and then it's just a matter of who else would be willing to buy them, and there probably are some other suitors, but more than likely that's just driving up the price that Microsoft would end up paying. I think so. I haven't heard anything for sure. This just all fits with what is happening right now with all these companies involved.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I can almost guarantee that Xbox is at least having the conversations. If they know that a NetherRealm and a TT Games are for sale, they are saying, hey, let's have a conversation, especially with NetherRealm. We have had people from Xbox talk about how they want Killer Instinct to come back. They just don't have a developer who can make fighting games in their stable. You get NetherRealm. So not only do you get NetherRealm and their history with Mortal Kombat, but you have a fighting game studio who could hypothetically revive something like Killer Instinct. Or better yet, let's do that ridiculous Mortal Kombat X Killer Instinct thing that was on Twitter a while back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even if it's like it's still a Mortal Kombat game, but it has a Killer Instinct season, that's something that they could do. Like you know, you're gonna want NetherRealm to like continue to be NetherRealm, and you don't want if they don't want to work on Killer Instinct, which is a distinct possibility, don't make them work on Killer Instinct. But say, hey, this content's here if you want to use it. And I bet that would make a lot of sense. I bet they would be like, yeah, we could bring in all these characters into our game and make them even play like Killer Instinct. That could be a lot of fun. And as we like are looking to make other deals, we'll do this stuff while we're making those other deals. Again, it just works together really nicely. I think NetherRealm specifically would probably it's probably going to be pretty expensive. That is a very lucrative studio. They make a lot of money. They have every time they release a Mortal Kombat game, it is in the top 10 sellers on the MPD chart for the year. And then I think in the following year, it's at least in the top 20, but I think it's also in the top 10. Like it is like one of those games that continues to sell forever, especially this most recent one. And also we know that Sony has a lot of interest in fighting games right now, and maybe they don't. And I think a lot of that's about like anime fighters, and then the traditional sort of Street Fighter style fighters and stuff like that. But they bought they bought Evo, right?
Yeah, they bought
the
Evo.
fighting game thing, and Mortal Kombat's a huge part of Evo as well. So maybe Sony would be interested. Maybe they're part of the ones bidding on this, and I don't think they'd be able to outbid Microsoft if Microsoft's that interested. But again, that's going to drive up the price, and it's going to be pretty expensive. So I will be interested to see what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Phil, if I'm Xbox, I'm calling them. But if you're telling me you have no interest in making Killer Instinct, deal's canceled. If you don't want to make Killer Instinct, we don't need you. Peace. That's my stance on NetherRealm. Like, obviously, Mortal Kombat's cool, but Killer Instinct is so rad, and it's sad that it's sitting dormant because there's no team that is gonna make it or wants to make it. So again, NetherRealm would be cool, and it would give them fighting games in their first party lineup, which would be huge. But like you said, there's probably competing offers. NetherRealm is, in the fighting game space, a hot commodity because their last several games have just been incredible. And like you said,
massive hits,
sold incredibly well. So there's probably a lot of offers. And if PlayStation is serious
Mortal Kombat's bigger now than it's ever been in its past. It's bigger now. Like, you remember, think in the 90s when it was like this massive cultural touchstone. It is several orders of magnitude bigger now in terms of the money it makes than it was then. So yeah, it's just a huge IP.
Yeah, and if PlayStation is serious about Evo and what that acquisition means for them as a brand, having Mortal Kombat as a first party PlayStation studio, that would add a lot of value. I mean, they got Street Fighter V as an exclusive for PlayStation, and if they had Mortal Kombat as an exclusive, that'd be some stiff competition for Xbox in the fighting game space. What would Xbox have that competes direct? I mean, there's Tekken.
They just they just kind of wouldn't. I feel like they would have to sort of bow out of that and just say, hey, fighting games aren't our thing. You go to the other one if you want fighting games. I kind of feel like they would have to do that.
Yeah, it would be tough. It would be
What was that bad Xbox fighting game? The original Xbox.
Tau
game.
Fist of Lotus.
Yes, that's
with the bruising and all the I mean, that was a banger, dude. I don't know what you're talking about, but that moved the needle for Xbox in the fighting game community.
Yeah, I mean, it was no Masters of Terraskazi, the Star Wars fighting game, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
So yeah, those are interesting acquisitions for the reasons you mentioned. Phil Spencer's been vocal about they want more titles. They want more family-friendly games. They need some developers and some teams that can fill that gap and release titles. So, with TT, maybe if it isn't, I imagine Lego comes with it. But I imagine even if it isn't, they have a team who's experienced making that style of game, who can tackle maybe new IP or other things in that for everyone wheelhouse, which again, right now, Xbox doesn't have a huge amount of teams I feel like that want to. Rare has abandoned that completely. Like Rare is focused on new IP. So people want Banjo. People want Banjo to come back. Rare's not doing it. Rare doesn't really care to do it at this point.
Right, and I think it could fit. It's not. I wouldn't just expect them to also work on like movie tie-in Lego games anymore. If they come with a Lego license, like this is an opportunity to sort of take a lot of Microsoft IP and say, hey,
Ooh.
let's make them family friendly. Let's do Halo Lego. Like honestly, like after Halo Infinite, let's do that, and let's do the Minecraft Halo tie-in or Minecraft Lego tie-in. Finally, let's get these two kids together. Let's let them have some fun. I think that there's a lot of possibility there for them to make those traditional Microsoft IP even more family friendly. In the case of Minecraft, obviously the biggest family game in the world, really. But tied in with Lego makes it even bigger, and then take some of these other franchises and find ways to make them appeal to even if it's like a composite game where it's like an all stars Microsoft IP cast in a Lego world. They could do something like that as well, and try to find ways to make their stuff more appealing to kids.
I like where your head's at. Lego Halo, Lego Minecraft as Xbox exclusive, Lego Sea of Thieves, like those.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't even. Yeah, because the problem with Lego and the problem with WB for a buyer is all of the IP licensing mess that you get. Like nobody wants to deal with all those licenses and have to pay for all the licenses perpetually. So if you can look at your first party studio, like you said, like a Halo, like a Minecraft, you don't pay a licensing fee, but you still get to make, well, I mean, Lego, I'm sure you're paying a licensing fee to Lego, but outside of that, ooh, there's some possibilities for some E for everyone bangers.
Yep. And that's stuff you throw on Game Pass, and yeah, you get the goose pimples because you're like, oh, doesn't that work out so well? Like just getting everybody onto Game Pass and then just giving them a chance to play all these games, and like once the family's on there, that's when you have a chance to appeal to older siblings and parents and get them into Game Pass. But if the kids asking for Game Pass, that unlocks a lot of potential for Microsoft. So that's what they want. They want kids asking for Game Pass, and more than they are right now.
I'm gonna get to a couple super chats real quick. Yo, Donnie says, imagine Avowed versus Elder Scrolls 6, Killer Instinct versus Mortal Kombat, Fallout 5 versus The Outer Worlds 3. That is all. So, I mean, yeah, there's a scenario where Xbox is going to have so many teams and genres on lockdown that they are going to have big games competing in the same space, in the same genre. But, I mean, I'm sure
it's not competing if you're like, oh, I play this game. It's like, well, you subscribe to Game Pass. Like, it's all the same to them in the end. Like, whatever reason you subscribe to Game Pass for is that they're happy with that. It's all additive. That's the thing about this subscription service is these games. It's not like putting Titanfall right around Battlefield. If EA had a subscription service right then, and that was the primary way people got their games, it would be like, well, I got it for Battlefield because I wasn't interested in Titanfall because that's the bigger game. Oh, and now Titanfall's here as well. It's all additive at that point. Like when Microsoft realizes that, so they can't really compete against themselves. It's not how it works.
They're not expecting everyone in Game Pass to play every game. Like that's they want the opposite.
They want that key thing that whatever it is that gets you into Game Pass is the key, and then everything else is just gravy.
Exactly. Eternal Umber with a super chat. What's up, Miles and Jeff? Gotta say, I disagree with you on NetherRealm not working on Killer Instinct being a deal breaker. Mortal Kombat is massive. Obviously, I was being facetious, but yes, Mortal Kombat is massive. Definitely more valuable than Killer Instinct. Sadly.
Get out of here, Ed Boon. You don't like Jago? What's his name?
Yeah.
Jago. I can't remember his name.
Fulgore. If you're not a Fulgore fan, get the
Fulgore. If you're not a Fulgore fan, we don't even want to look at you.
Sorry, Ed. Face it. Fulgore is more iconic than Scorpion or Sub-Zero combined.
I do love Fulgore, though.
I do. Quintessential weird tech 90s and just
silicon graphics, like 3D models. Yeah, absolutely. I love that stuff.
All right, so last little bit here as we're wrapping up the discussions and wrapping up the show, really. Acquisitions, Jeff. It's been this kind of obsession for a lot of folks this entire year. People wanted 6 acquisitions from Xbox to E3. Every single week, there's new rumors of acquisitions. In your eyes right now, if you're picking 3 developers, who are the most likely acquisitions in your eyes? Or who are the 3 developers Microsoft is targeting?
I think it would be those ones that it's working with on publishing games, Avalanche, IOI, and then after that, I don't know. Take your pick, but those would be the big ones, I think. And then I think one of those WB studios probably would be number 3 on that list. But I'm hesitant because again, I haven't heard anything personally, but and because I think when you already sort of have those deals in place for publishing a game, as a first party game from an external studio, you want to kind of see where things go. You want to see if they're able to hit milestones. You want to like get to know them, and I know they're well into that process with some of those games. And if those things are going well, that get to know you process could easily turn into putting a ring on it, right? Like that's what they're doing. They're dating these studios right now, and we might see a marriage. I think that the early response to the Contraband like teaser was good, and I think Microsoft might be feeling good about that project. I know that Avalanche missed some milestone dates along the lines, but I don't know how much Microsoft cares about that. A lot of studios miss deadlines. A lot of studios push things back. They as they're trying to figure out the ambition of their project, that things can get out of hand. So I don't think that's like some sort of deal breaker. So I think it's possible that Microsoft's like, hey, we're feeling good about this project. We're feeling good about what you've done in the past. Let's bring you in. And I think that, IOI is working on such a massive game for Microsoft. It's a huge budgeted game right now. At a certain point, it might make more sense to just say, hey, can we fundamentally change this deal and just bring you into the fold? And then you'll just have all the resources you need, and we don't need to worry about like making sure that this huge budget for this game turns into a game. We could just make sure that we could just all work on the game together. I think that might be that might make some sense just financially. But this is all speculation. I don't know. I know that we're hearing acquisition season. That's the thing on Twitter today. It's season. But it felt like it's been acquisition season for Microsoft since before E3. Maybe this is all part of it and things just got pushed out a little bit. But with Sony making moves, it does feel like Microsoft is going to respond, and maybe it's with one of these really big teams. And those would be the teams I would be thinking about first.
Yeah. I've talked about the exact same thing before. The whole process of this Xbox Game Studios publishing partnership is, as they have publicly said, they are looking for teams that they have a good history with, and they are looking for teams who can come out and deliver a new IP and have it be successful. So if they're looking at the Contraband, new IP, IO Interactive's
Right.
Project Dragon, new IP, if Xbox sees the promise of these and understands the value, they're probably more likely to pick them up. That being said, I have no idea what the timeline looks like for that. With these projects being a little ways out, I don't think we're going to necessarily get an announcement for IO or Avalanche in the next week. But who knows? Like you said, maybe the relationship's going well. We had Avalanche come out recently and basically talk about how Game Pass has been huge for them, and it's made Xbox way more appealing as a platform for them and made them look at Xbox in ways they hadn't before. And then you had Xbox Game Studios Publishing basically advertising positions and helping, Avalanche fill positions for this project. So again, I think those are the most likely. Some of the other things, your Texlands, your Asobos, your NetherRealms, your TT,
Right.
a lot of those are more speculative. There's probably conversations happening, and there's conversations constantly happening. So I feel like that's where a lot of these rumors kind of come from. Is I heard somebody was talking to somebody about this, and so that turns into, I think Xbox is going to buy this.
Yep, that stuff. You're right. Constantly. I mean, they would just not be doing. There's people at these companies whose job is to always be having those conversations, always be picking up the phone, always be running the numbers, and running the numbers often involves calling people up and saying, "Hey, what's up? What would be like a fair price?" in so many words. And I think we hear those rumblings a lot these days, and I bet those conversations are happening more frequently now than they've ever happened before, and so that we're hearing about them more. But they're happening more often because people are more interested in making acquisitions. Again, I talk about this all the time. The environment is so ripe for it. These studios they want to sell now. They feel that they're at their high price. These companies want to spend the money on their books. They want to get them out of their bank accounts because they're not making any interest. They're afraid they're going to lose money on them because of inflation. Everything is so ripe for spending money right now on acquisitions. It's like, hey, we have this money sitting in the bank. How can we make it work for us? Like, that's how we're billion-dollar, trillion-dollar corporations. We didn't get to this place by just like letting our money sit around. We got to get it working for us. And right now, still, for many of these companies, the best way to get that money working is buy a game studio that can make games and knows how to like be, participate, like knows how to make either service games that can like make revenue that way, or could contribute greatly in Microsoft's case to Game Pass. So I agree that it is acquisition season, but when I say that, it's acquisition season because of all of those the circumstantial evidence. If anyone else specific evidence, that's their thing, and that's not me. So, but hopefully we hear soon.
Yeah, these deals take time is the reality. So
Yeah,
like Bethesda, we had people hearing about this Bethesda deal, and there was information floating around about Bethesda years before the deal closed. So yes, acquisitions are coming. Are we expecting Microsoft to drop an acquisition every week or within the next week?
right.
No. And I think people need to pump the brakes a little bit on when they're expecting these acquisitions to happen, because Xbox is more focused about getting the right teams and teams that they know will deliver for them than just getting a big number of teams. So maybe there have been conversations that have gone far and deals have almost happened, but Xbox was like, you know what, maybe this doesn't make sense for us. And Xbox, despite what some people may think, is not just throwing money around. They want to make sure that everything that they do for Xbox Game Studios benefits the future of Xbox Game Studios.
Yep, absolutely. And again, they have that variety desire right now, sort of motivating them. So maybe something comes out of left field that no one's thought of, no one's heard of, no one even bothered to check into. Maybe it is that thing in Japan that I've heard rumbles about, like, oh, maybe we do finally get, maybe that shoe finally drops. We always hear about Microsoft in Japan. Maybe that's what the next thing is, but we just don't know. So we'll have to see.
So in this battle of platforms and services, we had a period of time last generation where exclusives were less and less of a thing. What is your stance on the future? I personally think that with the way things are headed, unfortunately for people who are dedicated to one platform, we are going to see more exclusives than we've ever seen before. How do you feel about that?
I don't know if it'll be more than we've ever seen before, because I remember there was like that time in the early 2000s where like there were like licensed Star Wars games that would only come out on one platform, and each platform had like their own crop of Star Wars games. And I don't think it'll be quite like that. Like you might get one exclusive Star Wars game per platform or something like that, but they won't have like multiple. I guess a part of that is just we're making fewer games now, fewer bigger games than we were then, where they were like a lot of smaller games.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the importance of exclusivity is paramount right now. It seems like in terms of everyone's business model. I mean, we know Nintendo's stance on that. We know that PlayStation is thriving and is very intent on not just creating first-party exclusives, but in making big deals to get the third-party exclusives. And we know that's one of the reasons Microsoft's moving so hard to make. I mean, you could see what happened with Bethesda right before our very eyes. Like, Sony was just going to keep paying Bethesda for exclusive games. Like they already got 2 this year, Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop, and Microsoft's like, well, we can't let this stand. Let's not just go have this fight every single time for every one of these games. Let's just buy them. And those motivating factors, again, that circumstantial evidence has not changed. In fact, it's only seemed to be ramping up. It's more on their minds than ever. And so these companies are going to continue looking for every way to ensure they can get exclusives. And I think, the underlying reasoning for that, it's obvious. Like Microsoft looked at the numbers when they bought Bethesda. They looked at every scenario. They did. I've seen some evidence that they've looked at every scenario for exclusivity, timed exclusivity, a bunch of other ideas. And in the end, they went with full exclusivity, even though they ran the numbers and they knew they would lose some money because it's just so worth it, because they just consider they consider it marketing for their final goal, which again is Game Pass. And everyone else they're competing with sort of feels the same way in terms of the importance of exclusivity for accomplishing their specific goals. So yeah, I think that's what's fueling the acquisition season. That's what's fueling big investments in new first party studios, or Sony talking about like spending a lot of money to make new first party live service games because they want to have their own versions of that instead of just always relying on third parties to make money through live service. Yeah, I think you're right to frame it that way. That it's at least good. First part or exclusive games are more important now than they've ever been. Even if we don't necessarily get in terms of just raw numbers more than we've ever had before, we'll really feel that sting of like, if you are on one platform, you're going to be missing out on a lot of really big exclusive stuff, at least for the next several years.
Yeah, we've seen it with the video streaming services. Your Netflix, your Hulu, your HBO.
Yeah.
They are obsessed with having the biggest reasons for you to subscribe to the service. And with Xbox Game Pass mirroring those services, like I can't imagine that Xbox isn't going to be more obsessed and focused on exclusive than they've ever have, because they want you to sign up for Xbox Game Pass and they want to give you the biggest and best reasons to do that. And PlayStation, as much as people want to criticize their approach and feel and say that they're not competing, they understand that. There's no way they're going to sit by and let Xbox just swoop up all these teams and swoop up all these exclusives, as we've seen with Final Fantasy 16, as we're going to see with more big games. PlayStation is going to lock down exclusivity. So yes, like you said, maybe not raw numbers. Maybe we won't see more exclusives than we ever have, but the exclusives that we will see will probably be a lot bigger than they have historically been.
Yeah. And I think Microsoft will continue at a certain point, like it's exclusives in terms of like to the platform. If Sony ever says yes to Game Pass, those games will be on PlayStation. Like it's like that. So it's not necessarily counter to what Phil Spencer said before about like not loving the idea of exclusives. He's sort of not the hurdle there. If other companies would let him put Game Pass on their systems, I think he would be very open to releasing those games on other platforms. But the exclusivity is to the Netflix of games thing, like you said, Game Pass. So yeah, that's the key there.
Exclusive to platforms where Game Pass exists was a very specific phrase. That was,
yes, it was.
10 people probably wrote that line. Like there was probably a room full of people that wrote that line. It was said for a specific reason. That was an invitation to your Nintendos, your PlayStations to be like, hey, we're not adverse to you having the service on there. We are going to have huge games that people want to play. And at a certain point, they are going to buy an Xbox, or they are going to buy into the Xbox ecosystem, because they're not just going to skip all these games. If you want to avoid some of that, you can just put Game Pass on PS5. Problem solved. There you go. Which I think ego will probably be a big part of the reason that won't happen, at least for a while. But
for a while, yeah. We'll see. We'll see if anything ever changes there. But yeah, for now, they ran the numbers. They looked at it. Putting this stuff exclusive to Game Pass is what makes the most sense. And yeah, I mean, because why make it even like timed exclusive and then have to spend a bunch of money on marketing trying to get people to realize how good of a deal Game Pass is, when you could just let the exclusivity work for you? That's why you bought these studios in the end. Yeah.
Jeff, thanks so much for hanging out, man. Really appreciate it. I'm going to open it up to you guys in the chat. If you have any final questions, drop them now. Huge shout out to everyone who tuned in today. Again, if you're new to the show, every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern, I have amazing folks like Jeff Grubb here. But for the folks watching, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just find me on Twitter at Jeff Grubb. Come hang out with me there. My DMs are open if you ever have anything you want to ask me or anything like that. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter. I always put whatever I'm doing. I always try to retweet it. Like I was on this show today, I retweeted that I was there. So if you ever want to like keep up with what I'm doing, that's a good way to do it. But then on GameSpeed, check out my writing on GameSpeed as well. GameSpeed.com.
Cool. Really appreciate it, man. We're gonna wrap this up, but thanks to everyone who tuned in, and we'll catch up with you guys later. Have a good one.
Bye.